Shut up and sit down.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Takeover Tuesday podcast. I am David Allen. We will be without Carlos Redlick today. He is busy, he is in Vegas. But we have a special guest, Kean Gardner, world traveler, dance enthusiast, and author. I've read numerous Medium posts by you, Kean. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, David. I am very excited to be with the Takeover Tuesday listeners and yourself.
Yeah, man. I don't remember quite where I found you or how I found your stuff. Probably on Medium, because I'm a pretty regular Medium reader.
Okay.
And you had some interesting posts on there about escaping your day job, doing some traveling, some, for lack of a better term, yeah, some weird experiments that you were
Yeah,
you were attempting.
this tends to be a common challenge in introducing me, and I wrote about that a bit, which is actually a strength. This kind of
Yeah,
fumbling and kind of figuring out the curiosity of what I've confronted and tried to do over the last year and a half. But you hit the nail on the head. I mean, if you had to sum up kind of what I've done since I worked and planned to leave my job, and I left my uh, office job, my traditional 9 to 6, about a year and a few months ago. I've been traveling the world. I've been an aggressive and passionate traveler. And I say aggressive only because I grew up a military brat. So the passion for travel was at first forced on me.
right.
And then it kind of turned into, my comfort zone. So I think that's something I care a lot about. Plays a big role into why I left my job and why it was such a mission for me to kind of be able to break out of the confines that I think corporate America locks on us with 10 or 15 vacation days a year, and that was killing me. Um, and so, yeah, I've written some of the posts I think you came across, and then when you reached out to me too, is through some of my deals I share. So really, what I care a lot about is helping everyone get a chance to break out of their comfort zone, whether that's personally, and I think a common theme. A lot of personal development folks and self-help development folks will essentially, say you've got to break your boundaries, you've got to break out of your comfort zone. But for me, it's a bit more extreme. I think it's kind of like with the gym. Everybody knows the advice. It's just what actually gets your butt off the couch and gets you to the gym. And with personal development, and especially with travel is such an easy one where I think it really can exactly motivate people, give them kind of a real traumatic, like a positive traumatic experience in terms of exposure to new cultures, different lifestyles, and kind of challenging maybe some of the norms or barriers you create for yourself, which are unique to everybody. But so I'm really motivated to kind of get people traveling, and I've learned over the last few years, and especially the last year and a half, with constantly kind of leaving each month for a few weeks at a time to different places, testing out how to travel very cheap and like learning how to do that with key parts of the world from the U.S. And I help people do that.
Yeah, that sounds like I'm sure you're gonna drop some knowledge today for our listeners, because we have essentially sort of two groups that listen to this, from what we can determine, which is, of course, Carlos and I are copywriters. We do copywriting, so
Okay.
we create sales pages and letters and stuff for people to sell whatever it is they're doing. So we have a lot of beginning, but some more advanced copywriters who listen to this. And we also have just general people who want to start a business or just starting a business, and because you're so, fresh into your own experience, a year and a half, I thought it would be good too. I think that was one of the things that drew me towards you was you're sort of right in this beginning phase of like really kicking things off and getting it going and stuff. So it's fresh in your mind. I find a lot of people that have done things for years already almost forget, what really got them started and how those things sort of fell into place when they were first kicking that 9 to 6 habit, as you say.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the key things I've noticed and that I struggled with for the longest is as I mentioned before, I was always kind of I knew deep down that I kind of enjoyed making money through non-traditional means or in unorthodox ways. So even out of school and fresh out of university, uh, I was still, even though I was entering the working world, and my professional background was in the technology side of job search. So I worked for the ladders.com for several years, then a company called Real Match. I was in project management. So and then moved from kind of account management and working directly with companies and their HR staff to more the technology side and managing developers, designers on
Okay.
projects for specific clients. So it was, pretty rigid. That definitely some like rules there, structure, methodology to doing things, and I didn't enjoy it. I mean, I definitely, I think everybody needs that, and that's one of the biggest challenges I would say over the last year and a half is absolutely like learning how you work on your own, how you pull resources together, and how you create that structure for yourself has been. And I would definitely say, just as a quick aside, that traveling to a new country every month, for 3 weeks at a time, and then coming home for a week, and then picking another country for 3 weeks at a time is not the way to go about scaling a business. So I learned that
Yeah,
the
no
hard
doubt.
way.
No doubt.
Yeah. I had a great time. So if you're a digital nomad and you're excited by the idea of becoming a digital nomad or building a business abroad, my one strong piece of advice would be to pick one area of the world and stay there for a few months. Um, and
Yeah, it's
uh,
hectic. It's hectic because I,
just
I do the same thing. I'm a digital nomad. I actually do copywriting in addition to street performing, and street performing is what sort of got me
oh, that's awesome.
traveling. So
Yeah,
yeah, I can relate to that. I usually settle down for there's some. I mean, during the summer I'm more active. I would say I would travel around more and sort of go different places because usually you're following the sun,
yeah,
so to speak.
yeah.
Trying to get to cooler places. I'm currently in New Orleans right now, and in the summer here it's like the temperature of the sun basically. So
Oh yeah,
you have to get the heck out of here and
sweltering.
yeah, it's sweltering swamp like. So yeah, so that got me traveling, and I think that is a very important point that you bring up is when I'm in New Orleans I usually stay for the winter, so I'm here for several months, and that really helps me with the copywriting aspect, and it's helped me with this podcast because it's more regular thing where
Definitely.
we
Yeah, you're building like a consistency, even though you're
exactly.
still give yourself that freedom to explore and kind of pick new things you want to learn or kind of build your own structure, but the structure still needs to be built.
Yeah, I think if
um,
anyone listens to the first 5 episodes of this podcast when we were doing it in different cafe. I was doing it in different cafes and stuff, Nashville and a few other places. I think it was a little a little worse audio wise and so forth. But
definitely.
tell us about some of your. So you left your corporate structure. What was the first thing? So let's give the lead up, sort of like you wanted to
Sure.
get the hell out of there, basically.
Sure, yeah. So to kind of dive more into the story, so it was about 2 years from leaving my job and about 3 years, I guess, into my professional career. I think most people, I'm 29. I'll be very frank, regarding my age. Um, Hopefully, it seems like the technology realm is starting to, try and add some Hollywood aging to, how they publicize and glamorize the leaders. So it's almost like, in Hollywood when you're 40, you're like 80, and now it's like in tech, if you're 40, it's game over. You
Right.
should have done it when you were young. But no, I hopefully still have some runway. But the so 2 years out, I read the 4 Hour Work Week. It wasn't, I'd been reading different content up to then, but I think that was just a very clearly, simply written book that resonated with a lot of people. I run a meetup in New York City called New York Personal Development Meetup, which is one of the largest personal development meetups in New York, and co-collaborate with some leaders there. And it's just I don't know how many times I've come across people that's mentioned to me that was the book that got them started, and I have to admit it was for me too. It really just kind of stuck with me, and from there it had some very actionable advice in it regarding your quantifying fears, and that's what really resonated with me. And Tim Ferriss did a good job. And for your listeners, I would assume if they're, copywriters kind of working on their own business, they're aware of who Tim Ferriss is. But if not, please check him out.
Yeah, he's
uh,
great.
I think he's got some great content, and I take him with a grain of salt on some things, but I think the 4 Hour Work Week and his content regarding learning and breaking, your walls and kind of barriers and inhibitions is important. But what he advises, he has kind of this matrix or this template, and I did it. I sat down. It was about 2 years out from leaving my job, and I was trying to kind of quantify my dreams, quantify my goals, and then like quantify the worst case scenarios, which I had never done before and never really thought about doing. And one of them, and quite a few of them, I was able to kind of make very vivid. One was, what if I'm homeless? One of my
Yeah.
biggest fears is like I can't go home. I'm too embarrassed if I take this risk and I run out of money, and I'd have to sleep on the ground. So what I started doing, kind of taking it a step further, and this is kind of my philosophy, and not only just quantifying your fears, but taking direct action and confronting the ones that maybe scare you the most, or the ones that you might have. They might not be fun to confront. They'll be very uncomfortable to confront, but I think there might be an edge of like excitement trying to confront them. And so what I did was I threw out my bed. I wanted to start sleeping on the ground at home, and
Right.
kind of like it's like dribbling with a flat basketball to me. And if you dribble with a flat basketball, it's like dribbling with a one with full air should be easy, or training with curling 100 pounds should make curling 50 pounds easy. So
Right.
that was kind of my philosophy here, was like, if I want to introduce all my worst fears and confront them head on. That way, uh, I can get rid of some of the anxiety I have surrounding being committed and anchored to traditional income, the structure, and all the things that I felt were holding me back from accomplishing what I was dreaming about and fantasizing about, which was at the time, and still is, very important to me, was traveling the world and having that freedom to kind of live where I want. Say I want to do a month here, and make some money doing whatever the heck I want, meet people. And that wasn't going to happen in that working world. So I threw out my bed, started to sleep on the ground, and that was kind of my first foray into like learning like this isn't so bad, and I could handle it. And I actually have stuck with that habit. So I still sleep on the ground about 5 days a week. For romantic reasons, I have a bed. I since bought a bed about a month or two later after I realized, having a female company and staying wasn't really appealing if I say, hey, here's a nice blanket on the ground for you.
Right. If
But
ladies are listening to this, then it's all okay. It's okay. You've got a
yeah, exactly. He has a bed. Okay.
Well,
But
I think that's good though, because you were conditioning yourself for like those worst case scenarios.
exactly. And there's a lot of, again, in that realm of personal development, or getting to a mentality of self-reliance, self-confidence, risk tolerance, building risk tolerance. There's a lot of advice there, and discomfort challenges, where a lot of them are social based. And I think those are very important. Being able to, I think Noah Kagan, a popular marketer who I definitely am a fan of. I've met him and hung out with him. He's a really cool guy, very genuine, which is a big deal in the personal development world. I feel a lot of them are disingenuine.
Right.
So he's the real deal, and a unique personality. But he's a big advocate of kind of like just going and getting your first dollar, going out and um, socially engaging in ways that you're not used to, so you get comfortable selling. And I think even outside of selling, it's a very, very strong asset. An important part of my journey was those challenges. So what I did was I created a year of challenges after quantifying and doing my matrix of what are my fears, what do they look like, how do I take what's like, I'll wake up sweating in the middle of the night, just having some kind of nightmare of whatever anxiety has painted for me at the time at 3 a.m. I wanted to make that vivid first, and then I wanted to create like a challenge that would give me a taste of it, so I really could say I kind of conquered it. And there were a whole bunch. I mean, some were really weird, and they just started to turn kind of fun. Like I was doing basically week-long experiments. Like one was like not wearing underwear for a week. Another was like, and they were small,
Is that the
personal.
commando challenge? Or?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was just like things that I thought other people did that were weird, or that I thought I would never do or could never do. I just said screw it. Like I'm
Yeah,
gonna try.
I think that's no. I think we have that in common. And I have another friend that's we had on the podcast here. a little bit ago, Mitch Miller,
Okay.
another copywriter, and we talked about this. Now I'm curious, did you ever get into any of the dating men's,
Like pick up?
yeah, like pickup and stuff like that? Because there
Yeah.
seems to be a sort of common thread with some of the guys we've had on this show that are in the self-development sort of, have broken through some of these mindsets. They came in contact with, if they didn't go through some of those things necessarily, but they came in contact with that information.
Definitely. I had a friend who took care of that for me. Fortunately, he experienced close friend of mine who he had kind of a bad breakup and was also pursuing a year. I think taking off a year around the same time I did. It's funny. He was kind of my resource for all that content, and I was his kind of wingman. So he was just educating me on what he'd read and what I should focus on, and perhaps just he would glean kind of the good insights and good content from all the massive content that's out in the manosphere, they call it.
Right.
Uh, and he would share with me a lot of those learnings and the wisdom, and we'd go out together and kind of definitely, as you mentioned, engage in confronting that social anxiety as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge one. That's a big one. That's why it
Yeah. So
has such effect.
there was a guy named, geez, I wish I could remember his name now off the top of my head, but I can't. But anyways, I remember one of the sort of things he advocated wasn't sort of one of the main sort of like dating and pickup coaches, but it was, or companies. It was sort of a smaller guy, and he advocated. He had this sort of system for getting you out, talking to strangers. He had this sort of like, you go through these various steps. You talk to a stranger at the coffee store. You would stand in front of when a car came up to the stoplight, you would sort of, as you knew it was going to stop, but you'd jump out in front a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some weird sort of like breaking these mental barrier kind of ideas. And I became single. Like I'm 41 now. When I was about 34, I became single out of a very long relationship. And so I went through a couple years where I was going out with my other single friends. And some of them had been in contact with some of this information and sort of filtered it to me.
Yeah.
And it's some of the best stuff for breaking through some of those barriers. I mean, if you have never tried to talk to women in a nightclub,
absolutely.
and
it's yeah, I mean that's ultimate selling. I think they always say like the root of why we even want money to begin with, as men, or even if if you're gay or whatever it is, it's just like there's this instinct for a lot of men, and baked into the male identity is being a provider, but it's not just to get money, it's to get money so you can be attractive and provide for the opposite sex. So, or for, your significant other or love interest. So it's feeling that attractiveness and that kind of developing that attractiveness is important. And that's like the real motivation. So if you attack that head on, jumping into the manosphere and kind of taking it from that content, it's like jumping a few hurdles, at the start. Yeah, I did. I mean, like I wasn't quite. My friend was like obsessive, which is funny. I mean, this guy he was quantifying. He had an Excel spreadsheet of like, pickup lines he was using. Like he was A/B testing pickup lines to to a degree of like he's gonna use one line 50 times and measure the outcome. And like
right, he was going about it very strategic.
Yeah, it was interesting, and he like nailed it down to like a science. He just got so good at it and so comfortable. And yeah, I mean, he took it, and he learned kind of the detriment of that as well. But I think, even with the social element, that's to me, that's one side of the coin, is like breaking free of social expectations, learning how to kind of stand on your own, and be very grounded in your own self confidence. That's kind of what I see a lot of people lack, is that it's like a very inauthentic self confidence. It's a very learned kind of program, um, by the book kind of confidence I feel from people. And then when you really meet someone that's comfortable in their own skin and knows what they want, you kind of feel it. And that's kind of where I think what I began to focus on was it seemed to benefit me. That was the interesting thing, was like I think it's plowing through like a wall with no tools, no armor, no drill when you're just going out and you're, we'll say in the pickup scene as an example, or doing these social challenges. You will eventually get through, but it's a lot of running into that wall.
Yeah.
You got to do it for a little while. Like you mentioned, it was a few years of you kind of going out, and everybody's experience is different. Maybe you were just a stud, and in your first few weeks you were
Well, I was
completely
lucky. I would
comfortable.
say I was lucky because I was sort of my personality largely came from my father, and my father was, looking back, it seems obvious now, but my father was a very gregarious sort of character. Everyone sort of knew him, around town. We were from a small town, and so I think I adopted that personality very, it just sort of
Okay.
osmosed to me. So when I
Yeah.
did come in contact with a lot of material, I never really had the problems of talking to strangers because I would talk to strangers for just to stave off boredom.
Sure.
Uh,
For fun. Yeah.
yeah, just for fun. I was always sort of very talkative. But when I saw, it was interesting to see these dynamics, though, these social dynamics, if you will, at work, and that was a very sort of narrow, dating and pickup or whatever. But they apply to so much more. You could easily see how they leapt over into sales, persuade, all sorts of persuasion elements and stuff like that. And eventually, and I was just interested in psychology because I do magic when I street perform. I'm a magician, and
Oh
so
wow. Yeah, I saw your photos. I was
yeah,
definitely going to ask about that.
yeah.
So I'm curious to learn
Psychology,
that. Yeah.
yeah, has always been my sort of something I'm very interested. It drew me into magic because I got into it really late. I wasn't sort of that child magician guy, and then into copywriting because I found out that a very famous copywriter had actually written something that had sold me on a workout course, and that intrigued me. That I was seduced, if you will. So I think you've encountered some of these same ideas. Is that they extended into breaking other barriers, such as travel barriers, being homeless, being without money. Because now,
Exactly.
now that I'm around more street performers on a regular occasion and stuff, especially here in New Orleans, there's a whole, it's like a mecca for street performing. You see that, in street performing, I mean, you go out and start a show when people aren't expecting one. So there's this ultimate sort of like barrier breaking thing. I mean, if you can do that,
Yeah.
you can basically do anything, and then
Definitely.
ask for money. So it's really
Yeah,
binds all those things together. And
absolutely.
you do see street performers when they start off new, fresh guys have a problem asking for money. That is one of the barriers. I think just the human part of the human condition is this asking part.
Definitely. Definitely. And that's what's interesting. It's I to kind of relate and similar to you with your upbringing, I think I was always pretty um extroverted, and before switching to a business major, I was a theater major. As you mentioned too, I teach dance, so I was always into hip hop dance. I used to perform. I did, I worked with an agency and mainly performed a lot in Philadelphia and did like the club scene, promoting fashion companies, and did all kinds of stuff. Open for famous acts at concerts. I definitely had a good time. Um, and I still do it. I teach one on one now through Skype. That's one of my sources of income when I'm traveling, is I take one on one students uh, for dance. Exactly. So I have like advanced students that learn some more advanced styles, and then really kind of my biggest audience that I help is men that are really uncomfortable with their bodies, and kind of just teach them how to dance at a party. So I had an online course called How to Dance at a Party as well. Um, yeah, so and with street performing too, I think I struggled with that. I still struggle with that. It takes me a while to like warm up to it. But I think even outside of like, the biggest breakthrough for me was and what that act of throwing out my bed taught me was kind of like the burden of my home, like my home life and the things I was anchored to at home, and kind of and that's what I struggled with, especially when I finally even did leave my job initially, was kind of just creating like a productive home environment, and what that meant, and like even when I was on the road, like being not very anchored to distractions. And I did write a post about that, and kind of shared, like I boiled it down into kind of five different elements to like the steps to leaving your job, based on like these home and kind of personal slash social experiments I was doing for myself. But at livediff.com, so that's kind of it's a newsletter I'm curating. It hasn't launched yet, but um, I just kind of threw up a landing page pretty recently, and if you sign up there, I expand upon those 5 and kind of give like my 8, steps that I learned, and really kind of 8 crucial elements to, if you really do want to break from a traditional 9 to 6, kind of have financial security and some runway, and be prepared to like make the most of your time off. Um, and the biggest thing to me was like what I learned was like the social stuff was very important, but it began at home. Like I was mentioning before, kind of I think if you have a tool and you have like the right mentality and you're like the right kind of person. So you mentioned you have kind of an edge with taking on some of those social challenges and they accelerated your success. A lot of people do struggle with that. There's a lot of really talented people that obviously are not the best at commanding attention and being persuasive, and it comes from, I think, there is no one way. I actually get really frustrated when I see like speeches or talks where it's like it just feels too prepared. It doesn't feel genuine. And I think even in sales, there's obviously a lot of
Yeah, it's like a robotic.
method, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of method and kind of a guidance on and tools on like trying, working on being authentic, um, because it's such an important part of connecting with people, and uh, a lot of people can be introverted, can be, maybe a little weirder to most, but it's leveraging it as a strength. That's the hard part. And I think it begins at home. So my philosophy and my theory and how I help people, I've coached a few people over the last year, um, with like the financial side of things, like giving them. I had a tool I use. I called it my super mega awesome budget like years ago.
Oh
And
yeah, I read that part. Yeah.
yeah, so I wasn't, very, I would say,
High tech.
financially not high tech at all. Yeah, the
Yeah.
thing is hideous, and I'm not, it wasn't this beautiful mint like dashboard, though I did use Mint, and that's mint.com in case any of your listeners don't know. But with a combination of kind of like just a few of those tools, and then this budget I created, it was like just creating the habit of being like aware of my finances. And when coaching people now, it's I would say the real meat and potatoes of like why I was finally able to look over the edge and say, you know what, I'm giving my notice. I'm leaving. And it took longer. I should have left about 6 months earlier than I should have, but I was creating all these excuses in my mind, and fears were still creeping in, and it was like the reality of doing what I was about to do kept weighing in an ugly way, and I think what was holding me back really was just that authentic self-confidence and knowing that this was what I wanted to do and what I needed to do. So combined with the financial security, because a lot of people, especially with travel, and I talk to people about leaving their jobs or building their business, and it's a hot topic to talk about, especially today. It's definitely publicized, glamorized, and that is the job of the future, kind of.
Yeah, it
Um,
seems that there's a whole industry now that has sprouted up, um, of this sort of world traveling digital nomad person.
exactly.
It's become very popular. It's interesting because I remember, of course, before that, when there was none of those people, uh, it's interesting to see how that. And there's always been lifestyle things, of course. I mean, selling lifestyle has been a thing since the dawn of humanity, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
this sort of well, technology and stuff, of course, has allowed this. So this has become part and parcel with the advances in technology, where you can work from anywhere.
Yeah,
I'm,
definitely.
I'm sure some of our listeners have that in mind. That's probably one of the reasons why they listen to this podcast.
For sure. So I think the big thing there, was in order to be able to accomplish that, and what I think a lot of people don't consider in the equation to getting there is how their home life is structured. So it's kind of like those experiments in like minimalism or getting rid of things. Like recently it was more. I think one of my important steps is targeted consumption, um, and that's focusing on making sure that any time spent with like entertainment is kind of just like dieting. Like you're gonna cheat every once in a while, but you need a good substitute if you're gonna cheat, and make it a habit of like, instead of going for ice cream, going for like Greek yogurt or something. And it's it's very powerful. It compounds, and then over time, you'll see it has big results compared to the ice cream compounding over time and
Yeah, which has
having
additional
also
big
big
results.
results. So,
Not the kind you
not
want, but
exactly.
results nonetheless.
Exactly.
That's kind of the harkening back to Tim Ferriss and so forth from earlier. That is kind of like the 80-20
Definitely.
ideas. Is like these little things can make a big change over time.
And what's little, that's what's interesting. So what's little, what I challenge a lot is kind of like throwing out my bed seems big. It seems like such a
Right,
big thing,
right.
but it actually is a very little thing that had a big impact. And I'm a big fan. I think we mentioned in kind of preparing, and when we settled on a date to do this, anti-fragility is a big influence of mine. It was if for your listeners, if they haven't read the book or aren't familiar with Nassim Taleb, it's just it's a great, a lot of people disagree with it. I've actually met people here in New York who are familiar with Nassim Taleb and as an educator, because he's, I think, a guest lecturer or guest, like an adjunct professor at NYU. Um, and he hates academia. So there's a lot of academics and a lot of very, more rigid quantified thinkers that really hate his stuff. But he is very, if you're going to read his content, and his book Anti-Fragile is a great read. Black Swan, Fooled by Randomness, are other books of his. But his main premise is basically breaking kind of systems, the world, our behavior, economics. I mean, when I say systems, it translates from like your body systems and how your body operates to world systems, political systems. He extrapolates all these systems into three buckets, and it's fragility, which is when you introduce any kind of volatility or randomness or chaos, it crumbles and doesn't hold up very well. The body can be like that. Your home life can be like that. Your attention can be like that. And so it's interesting when I read that book. Well, actually, let me finish the three buckets. So fragile, then there's robust, which is things when you introduce chaos or randomness to it, it kind of just stays the same. It can withstand it. And then there's anti-fragility, which actually gets stronger from it. So in that example of like throwing out my bed, and then recently I kind of people are joking now because they think I'm just throwing out everything that's big. I threw out my
Right.
couch a few months ago, so I don't have a couch in my living room anymore because I noticed I kind of don't want to sit anymore, and I realized like it was such a small little thing that was attracting me to sit. And what I'm trying to improve on is like my Indian style sitting, and not that I'm like have really poor health or anything like that, but it's just like I wanted to kind of really get more comfortable sitting on the ground. I wanted to get more comfortable moving, and I actually have this tool I developed the last few months called a movement bank. Um, that's basically every hour I spend moving, I get to spend working at a computer. So for me, it's like I have to work, I have to move 5 hours a day, and it doesn't mean like go to the gym for 5 hours. It just means walk around, even cook. I just have to be on my feet for 5 hours. Then I'm allowed to sit behind my computer for 5 hours. I can spend those 5 hours at my computer. And to me, it's created kind of a better balance. But I had to remove everything that was like even subtly or subconsciously attracting me to sit. And my couch was a big one. It's just such a centerpiece. When I would come into my living room, it's like it was right there. So it seems like a big thing to get rid of it, but it's such a little kind of action that has this big impact and much more optionality for me. And with my bed, like sleeping on the ground, the benefits received there. So it's like a very volatile kind of act, a small one, like a very isolated small act that's very volatile, a sharp trauma to my bedroom and my sleep life. But the opportunity I gain there, the upside is huge. I mean, I was never able to like sleep comfortably in all kinds of beds. Now it's incredibly easy to sleep anywhere, really.
Yeah.
Um,
That,
yeah, even traveling now, it's kind of like it's opened up a lot of benefits for me traveling in terms of my comfort sleeping in airports when I have to. And it's a that actually is a big benefit when you're traveling a lot, to kind of, if you arrive late or arrive too early, just to be like, I'm going to crash in that corner. Um, and then with crashing at friends' places, or if there's people offering to let me stay, it opens the door even wider, because if people are aware that I sleep on the ground and I promote and publicize I sleep on the ground, they're very comfortable with me staying anywhere in their home. So if they even don't have a bedroom or a couch for me, they know I'm happy on the ground. So I have way more places to stay.
It's kind of a hack, kind of a travel hack.
It is, yeah. It's interesting, and I think where else are there kind of hidden benefits and personal experiments and norms you can challenge where you gain a lot of upside, that you don't even realize. One I've done for the last year and leading up to leaving my job too was I don't type very often. I actually bought Dragon Dictate, which is the premier dictation software, and I dictate all my emails because I notice even in my professional job, I missed it in my theater days. I really loved uh, working on my voice, so projection and working on the NLP folks, like the what is that, neuro linguistic programming, and I'm sure that's big in magic and kind of the magic community of language and um, even with sleight of hand and things like that, like hypnotism. It's powerful, but in theater it's very powerful too. So learning how to project your voice, vocal quality, intonation, inflection, and things like that have such an impact on persuasion and attention. And I was losing all of that in the workplace. I really was. I was typing email. I went from practicing and talking all day and storytelling, which humans and people have done for thousands of years and developed as such a strong skill, uh, and probably has benefits on your mind
Oh yeah,
and your
I think
your
so.
clarity of
Yeah,
thinking.
I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
I was one of the I left sort of two jobs when I hit the road and started street performing and copywriting and so forth and becoming a nomad. And one of the things, I worked at a nightclub for 5 years uh, as a head of security for most of those years. And one of the things that we ended up when this really benefit now in retrospect, at the time I didn't think anything of it because I just it served what we were doing. But in retrospect, I was like, man, that really prepared me for what was about to happen. It was kind of weird how it all sort of came together. Was we would have meetings, security meetings every Saturday night, and and we had a big security force. It was a huge bar, like you get 1,000 patrons a night coming through the bar, and so we had a pretty substantial security force of about 20 to 25 people on any given night, and so we'd have these meetings, and I would myself and some of the people I worked with would get up and sort of give these speeches, sort of a rundown of things that occurred, what happened, what went wrong, what went right, upcoming events, all that kind of stuff. So you were giving like a weekly speech. Maybe it's only 5 or 10 minutes, but it really trained me for later. And at the time I was doing magic too, but it really trained me for later when I hit the street where you had to project your voice and stuff. And really just working in a bar, I think, helped with my voice too, because I had to cut through the din of music and people screaming and carrying on like,
Definitely.
savages.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, like you use that word savage, and it's especially in the manosphere. I think for your female listeners, this might be a popular topic among men, of course, but it seems to be this ideology and this philosophy born, and paleo has really attached itself to it, the whole paleo movement. But I think even extrapolating it outside of just movement, it's kind of like, what else did we do for thousands of years that helped develop us and our brains, and what do we do that's like radically different now? And we create anxiety. Like there's a lot of, not to be like a conspiracy theorist or even like bringing up unfounded kind of beliefs, but I think there's just a lot of uh, attention given and a lot of questions raised around anxiety and the way we think and kind of our interaction with computers, and just a lot of new elements that have been introduced in the last 100 years to the way we socialize and live and spend hours a day doing things. And travel woke me up to that. I mean, it really did. Like growing up abroad, I kind of had the benefit of and I was born in Germany and raised in Europe and moved here when I was 8 years old. And then my father actually stayed in Germany, so I was going back every year. But that definitely gave me an advantage in being comfortable flying and traveling, which I'm really happy to see. Kind of around my age now, I finally see people that didn't fly their entire life taking that leap, having a little bit of money, finally working for a few years and ready to take that first vacation and go somewhere international. But um, it really showed me. I mean, especially the last few years, going to places that like I never thought I'd get to, and started to develop an interest in really seeing how these cultures live. And not to beat sleeping on the ground to death, but it was, I think, Thailand, China, and Morocco is where I saw like 60, 70-year-olds sleeping on the ground, and they were then getting up and getting in a full squat and fixing a motorcycle. And then, it was just, they were so active and so healthy. And the biggest thing, biggest question in my mind was they're sleeping on the ground though. Like in our country, they say that's the worst thing you could do at that age. It'll destroy your back and it's so bad for you. And yet I'm looking at these people benefit from it. And it just didn't phase them. It was like such a high benchmark of positive health, their ability in anti-fragility to sleep on the ground. They were so robust and strong and able to do that, that it was kind of like, an 80-year-old being able to bench press 300 pounds. That's like a great benchmark for his strength. And that kind of woke me up to a lot of things, and kind of showed me, what else do we not eat? It's like those known unknowns, a popular concept in marketing, like figure out the known unknowns, and then the big kind of mystery, blue ocean on another planet strategy is the unknown unknowns. What don't we know that we don't know?
Right.
And
Well, a good example of this, which is an example of a physical thing, but when I was, let's say 10 years ago, I used to know, because I have a decent memory, I would say, I used to know a bunch of people's phone numbers. And now today, I think I know my sister's phone number, and other than that, I know 0 phone numbers. I haven't had to learn phone numbers for so long because you put them in your phone now. That part has completely just gone away. I couldn't tell you. I could only tell you my sister's phone number. That's it. So there are things that have, because technology or the way the world has changed, you no longer have to do certain things. Now there's new things, of course, that have replaced perhaps those things. But and what you're talking about is a physical thing, like what we used to have to walk to get whatever, and some people still do, of course. And we're just talking mainly about, North America and stuff, because I'm from Canada originally, and it's sort of the same as the U.S. in that regard, in that technology has gotten to a point where you can be lazy, for lack of a better term, and still get all your stuff done, and yet in other parts of the world, like you say, when you travel, people are still doing all those things that we used to do here because it's set up differently. It's
exactly.
Walking and riding bikes and so forth.
Yep, exactly. And the interesting thing is, though, it's just like, what do they gain from that?
Right.
And it's,
What's the psychological thing too? Like,
absolutely. I mean, your ability to forget numbers, or not to remember numbers, we'll say, inability to remember numbers now, and me too. I think, what impact does that have? I mean, maybe we just don't remember numbers, and okay, hopefully that's it. But it could have this interesting impact on other aspects of our learning, our attention, and so many other areas. And that's, with the benchmark being positive of like lifting 300 pounds when you're 80 years old, and that's a great sign of strength. This could be a great sign or benchmark for inhibited learning capacity. I mean, you just, it kind of, I think there's a lot to experiment with, and this is with those unknown unknowns. The common philosophy is, and this is kind of tying back to what I wanted the freedom to do in leaving my job. So the big motivator was travel. It was like, I knew I wanted to travel. I knew I wanted to kind of see what being a digital nomad was about, this image and fantasy of what was being promoted to me constantly, and this is the lifestyle that's exciting and sexy, and James Bond with a computer around the world. But
now for you, was it mainly I have to go see these places before I die, or was it I just want to meet people?
no, it was the mentality. I mean, I came back on every vacation I took, and my last 2 years I went to I had a really cheap Euro trip, and I'll dive into that. I absolutely want to share some cheap, travel techniques and tips with your audience. Things that are, like that travel hack I mentioned about learning to sleep on the ground. That's a big one, and I think save you money. I have a lot of kind of weird hacks and content like that, but and like building up to that. But the main reason was I think I did like a European trip and kind of went to Italy and a few different places. Went to South Africa, Morocco, Thailand, Colombia, and they just, I came back very changed, and I realized I spent way too short a time there for the impact and the positive impact it was having on me. When I was there and kind of witnessing, engaging with people, engaging with a different culture, it was just really a huge plus. And in terms of like my well-being when I returned, it was I don't know. I mean, I felt completely different returning. And a lot of people feel that way. They'll go to like a Caribbean vacation when they're working and they come back recharged, re-energized for their job. But I was getting more and more jaded. I would return every time just like, and I like that way better than returning. Like I don't feel recharged. I feel bitter.
Yeah. That's weird, eh?
Yeah, it was a bitter motivation kind of building in me. Like I've got to do more of that. And
It's funny that we think about, North America. I mean, being from North America, I guess maybe. And you were originally born in Germany, so perhaps this is slightly different. But everyone sort of, you get this, and then I'm sure a lot of it is just bullshit too. But you get this line of like everyone sort of wants to move to North America. They want to live in Canada. They want to live and you get a lot of immigration, of course. But it's funny when people who have primarily lived here go overseas and come back. They're like, I want to spend more time. It's like almost the opposite. It's like
for sure, grass is greener.
Yeah, it's always grass is greener.
For sure. And I think, I mean, for me, it's just exposure. So it's kind of like, that's the thing. Grass is greener is all about. I want to be exposed to that grass over there.
And that's the end of part 1 of Kean Gardner's episode of Takeover Tuesday podcast. We shall return with part 2, as this was a very long interview with Kean Gardner that goes for about an hour and 40 minutes. And next week, you will not want to miss it because he drops the best low-cost travel hacking tip I have ever heard on a podcast. So if you would like to travel the world and do it at very, very reasonable rates, do not miss part 2 of Kean Gardner's episode, Takeover Tuesday podcast. Always like to thank Ben Sound at bensound.com for the intro and outro music, and we will catch you again next week.